Well, I've got about probably 40 minutes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And so we'll try to wrap it up well before then.
Okay.
So I'm a private citizen, and I'm just trying to discover what everybody's about so I can make a informed decision on who I'm going to vote for.
Right.
And I've looked in Facebook, and I've read some interviews that you've given in other places. But what would you say your top 3 issues are today?
Today, my top 3 issues, I'm running in a district that's north of the Bay. I mean, obviously the entire county is important, and the entire county has different issues. Personally, something that I'm probably most interested in is economic development north of the Bay. I believe that Walton County is in a spot where we're within a radius of some big cities and some big manufacturing plants where we can actually target specific industry groups. When I say that, I mean you have automobile manufacturers just around Montgomery. You got Airbus over in Mobile, and you've got Boeing buildings and stuff, Panama City, and you've got Eglin Air Force Base with all kinds of industrial stuff going on. Most of those manufacturing plants don't keep an inventory on hand. You have to have suppliers that are within a radius where they can deliver parts every day that need to be used to build those airplanes or cars or whatever it may be. And we have that. We're within a short drive of all those locations, and I believe that we have an opportunity to attract people who build the parts that those manufacturers need. You may find some company who's a manufacturer of the landing gear for an airplane.
What would make them move here as opposed to, there's plenty of land in Montgomery and these other places, these manufacturers?
Well, I think we have to sell Walton County. I mean, there's a lot of, especially these big business people who would love to live on the beach. And you have an excess of available space to build a plant, but you also have housing in South Walton and housing in North Walton that could be suitable for all levels of employees of that company. One of the biggest needs we have in North Walton County is affordable housing. Throughout the county, North and South Walton. Realistically, if you look at the definition of affordable housing, South Walton's not going to fit.
Right.
You can't buy land cheap enough to build a house cheap enough. But north of the Bay, Freeport, Defuniak, Mossy Head, all those areas, there's all kinds of space available.
I'd say Freeport's quickly being priced out of affordability.
Freeport's growing quickly, and there's areas around Freeport where you look at like Bruce or those other areas where you could actually still do some stuff. But
well, going back to recruiting manufacturing or tier 2 and 3 suppliers, I'm from Montgomery, and when Hyundai came to Montgomery, one of the challenges, and they overcame it because they're there, and I think they've been very successful, was the skilled labor pool available. So, and even our industry now talks about how hard it is to find reliable, skilled, consistent labor in the labor market. So what would we do about that, and what comes first? Do we recruit industry?
Well, I think it's a joint thing. I think it's hard to train a specific skill set until you know what skill set you need. But at the same time, when these tier 2 or tier 1 or 2 suppliers announce we're going to build a manufacturing spot in Walton County, and we're going to be building this part. We have a technical school in Defuniak that does really good, and it can target any specific industry they need to. Northwest Florida State College has a program where they can put together training programs for those specific jobs. And you would have time between the time an announcement's made, a company's coming. It's probably going to take a couple of years before they actually get a plant open and running to train that workforce, to get them ready to go. It's a challenge, but I think that we have the pieces in place to meet that challenge.
Do you have in mind any other industry types that might be suitable for recruitment?
Defense industry. I mean, you have Eglin Air Force Base does all kinds of stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of needs they have and government contracts that are available. I was speaking with a gentleman here a couple of weeks ago who used to work for a U.S. senator and tried to place grants for startup small businesses getting government contracts in the defense industry. We have resources like him who can help the county guide us down the path we need to go to be able to acquire those things. I think the county has to be a little more open to use the resources we have locally.
We'll talk about that. In what way, and what resources?
Well, people. If you look at South Walton County, you've got people that are retired from every industry you could ever imagine, who have been extremely successful in that industry, who are willing to help. I mean, they're looking for something to do because they don't, quite frankly, they're bored.
Okay.
We can't be afraid to say, okay, we're going to put a panel together, and we're going to try to determine what best fits Walton County industry-wise. And let's bring some of these people in and tell us their stories and take their input seriously, because they're the experts. They're the ones who have done this before. My experience, my background.
Well, tell me about that. Where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Mossy Head.
Okay. You went to Mossy Head High School?
Walton High School.
Walton High School.
Yeah.
What year did you graduate?
81.
81. And did you go to college right after that?
I did not. I went in the Air Force.
Okay.
Joined the Air Force, went to San Antonio, and never left San Antonio.
What did you do in the Air Force?
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement, okay.
And I was lucky enough that 3 of the 4 years I spent in the Air Force, I got selected to work what was called then the Armed Forces Police Detachment out of the City Police Headquarters. And we basically were a liaison between civilian police agencies and the military.
Golly, what do you think about what's going on right now?
It's crazy.
With law enforcement.
I'd have a hard time being a cop today.
Right.
It's just, it's unfortunate that that one incident happens. And I think most people, when George Floyd was killed, were on board with, this needs to be looked at when you figure out what's going on.
Right.
But then you have radicals from wherever that take over an issue. And it creates an atmosphere where you can't have change because you can't even have dialogue.
Yeah. Do you think law enforcement needs a reform of sorts, or how would you couch what needs to happen?
I would say that every profession goes through changes. Law enforcement's no different. But do I believe that there's institutional racism in law enforcement? Absolutely not. I don't see it. I've never seen it. Could there be racists who are cops? Absolutely, there can be. I mean, every group that you have is going to have bad people. I think that you have to be, police officers in general, and they are, but they have to be extra vigilant to try to, when George Floyd, when that whole thing happened, not just the officer with his knee on his neck, but you had 3 or 4 other officers standing around that did nothing.
Right.
I mean, it's up to them to police their own. And right. I think I've seen that in my career. They do. I mean, no one likes a dirty cop less than a cop.
Well, I was in the Army too, and I compare it to, in the Army, if you mess up, nobody's covering for you.
Absolutely.
You're getting dealt with. There seems to be a closing of the ranks within law enforcement of looking out for your buddy rather than policing your buddy up. I don't know if that narrative is true, but it certainly gets told.
Well, I think that there's a brotherhood, and that brotherhood tends to take care of their own. Okay, but I think when you're talking about criminal activity, that brotherhood doesn't cover that up.
Right.
I mean, that's a break in that armor. Really? I mean, because we had cops arrested in San Antonio. I mean, we had a group one time arrested for dealing drugs. No one covered for them. I mean, once it was learned what was going on, there was a really good investigation done, and every one of them went to prison.
Right. One thing about law enforcement, and then we'll move on to something else. I heard a comparison statistic, and it came from a retired Navy SEAL, and he commented that he spent 1/5 of his 20-year career in training.
Right.
And I believe standard law enforcement practice is something like continuing education or continuing training of about 40 hours a year.
Right.
Is the minimum.
Right.
Do you think law enforcement gets the right type of training and enough training to do their job effectively?
I think every department is different. In San Antonio, we had it set up where we had you spent 1 week every year in in-service training. And every year the curriculum changed. And every year there's a different focus. I think that there could be some more standardization across the board. But still, every department is going to be different. And the leaders of that department are going to determine the training that they need.
Walton County's got a different need than downtown Chicago.
It's different. It's a different atmosphere. It's a different policing atmosphere.
So, graduated in 81, you joined the Air Force.
Joined the Air Force.
Did you retire from the Air Force?
No. I did 4 years in the Air Force.
Me too, 4 years in the Army.
Got out and joined the police department in San Antonio. Served there for 22 years. Retired in 2008. It was a great career.
And you just moved home?
Yeah, basically. When I was there, as a police officer, I had some tremendous opportunities to do things beyond police work. I was elected by the 2,000 cops to represent them on our pension fund.
I read that.
The board of our pension fund.
What were your responsibilities in terms of managing the pension fund?
We didn't manage money. We're cops. We weren't investment managers. We set all policy as far as investment goals, investment guidelines. Legislative, our fund was created in state law, so any changes made to the fund had to go through the legislative process. And in Texas, the legislature is only in session every 2 years. So, and I chaired our legislative process for 4 sessions. So I led the creation of 4 legislative packages that increased benefits, actually decreased contributions, and just generally made life better for retired police officers and firefighters. But being a part of that, I got to be a part of growing that fund from $750 million to over $2 billion in assets.
What years were you managing?
I was on the board from 97 till
mid-90s to
mid-90s to the mid-2000s.
Yeah. 10-4.
The stock market was going crazy.
10-4.
Made a lot of money.
Well, that was good time to be there.
It was, but you know what was interesting is if you look at public pension plans across the country, a lot of them had a lot of trouble after the bubble burst.
10-4.
We never went crazy.
My pension fund had a lot of trouble.
We never went crazy with benefits. We had very good consultants and advisors that advised us, and we listened to them, and responsibly increased benefits to where, because we knew at some point that was going to stop. And San Antonio has been recognized nationwide for 20-something years as one of the best managed public pension plans in the country.
10-4.
And I'm very proud of having been a part of that. We never had financial trouble. The fund is over 90% funded, which is unheard of for public pension plans.
Wow.
And it was done through, making good decisions and listening to people who were professionals in their field, advise us, and taking that information and making it fit San Antonio and our needs. And it worked out well.
Did you control hiring and firing as
Staff. As far as managers, absolutely. We had a consultant that we would use, and the consultant basically did performance management. We had probably 30 different companies investing money in every asset class you can imagine.
Right.
And they were evaluated monthly. Performance was looked at monthly, and consultant would send us a report. We'd look at it. If we saw a manager that was underperforming their index, it's going to happen from time to time, and you don't make a decision. You don't make a decision on 1 month's performance.
Right.
But you didn't hire them. You hired them because they were the best.
Right.
You have to give them a period of time to perform. But there comes a point where you have to make a decision. You call them in and say, "Listen, what's going on? Has something changed, or have your investment professionals changed? Has someone left the company?" And you make decisions based on a lot of information. And you move on. And then, we fired some, we replaced them. We were hiring managers, giving them a $100 million portfolio.
Wow.
In large cap growth stocks.
Sure.
It didn't make sense to hire someone with less than that, because even if they had 100% return, it had very little impact on the fund overall. So your asset allocation was key. How much you're going to have in stocks and bonds and international and whatever it may be, whatever asset class there was. And then in the stock market, you have broken down into large cap, small cap, growth, value, tremendous number of different products. But by doing that, you really mitigate your risk.
Right. So you retired from the police department and made a decision to move back here directly, or?
Well, I mean, the last 4 years I was there, I was president of the police association. That was a tough job. I mean, you got 2,000 policemen that all have your cell phone number. And if they're unhappy, they don't mind calling.
Right.
And that position puts you personally in conflict a lot of times with what you think, what you know needs to be done.
Right.
And what you have to do as the leader of an organization. But, we had a lot of success. I mean, we had some bad cops we got rid of, and we had some we couldn't get rid of that we would like to have gotten rid of. But overall, I think it worked out, and I think that the people that needed to be gone were gone. The people that needed to be protected were protected. After that 4 years, did 2 terms, negotiated a $30 million collective bargaining agreement with the city. And after that 2 terms, it was time to go. It was just time to move on and do something else. Had an opportunity to go to work for a hedge fund out of New York, marketing 2 public pension plans. So I did that, and then once I did that, that was a traveling job. It didn't matter where I lived. Right. So we were able to move back home,
And how long did you do that?
Ended up being about 4 years, really just 2 to 3 years, and then a year and a half winding the company down. When Bernie Madoff happened, that really killed hedge funds as far as the public pension industry was concerned.
Right.
And the fund that I was working for was a newer fund, and it just they couldn't maintain.
There you go.
So it was a casualty of the war, I guess you'd say, but it was a great experience.
Were you living here while you were working for?
Yes.
Right. So you wrapped that position up, and
I had gotten my real estate license and started selling real estate.
I'm a broker too.
Yeah. So I started selling real estate, and it was just kind of an easy transition.
Yeah.
Going from one thing to another. My wife works, and she has a very successful career, and she enjoys what she does. So,
well, as a real estate agent, how do you feel about development or overdevelopment, or
I think there's a balance. I think, and
where do you think we stand on that balance today?
Parts of South Walton are probably on the verge of just can't do anymore. There's just no more room to do anything. But I think there's still room. I mean, and the difficult part of that is if you have a property owner who owns a piece of property, it don't matter where it's at.
Right.
If you own a piece of property, you have rights to go with that property. And if you come to the county and say, okay, I own this 5 acres and this is what I want to do with it, if what they want to do meets the requirements of the Comp Plan Land Development Code,
you got to do it, right?
You don't have a choice but to do it. If you say no, the county is going to get sued. The county is going to lose. The county is going to pay big legal fees and damages to that company, and they're still going to get the bill.
Do you think most people understand that there is a set of entitlements that already come with a piece of property?
I think most people understand it. There's a lot of people who don't like it,
right,
and wish it wasn't there. And that's, I chaired the Planning Commission for 5 years, and it's hard when you're making those decisions,
right?
Because you have to take your personal feelings out of it. There's a lot of projects we approve that if it was my personal decision to do, I would say no.
But you were just following the letter of the code.
You have to follow the code.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's what's going to make the county successful. If we don't like what's in the code, then we need to go through a process of changing it.
Is there anything specifically in the code that you would change if you had that magic wand today?
If I had the ability to change anything, it would take monster houses out of the picture completely. Unfortunately, the state has taken a lot of home rule away from counties.
Right.
And that's one of the areas that the state has taken over.
How did they take that ability to?
Said that the county can't regulate single-family residences beyond a certain point. What we tried to do, and what I advocated for the whole time I was on the Planning Commission, was find a way to slow down or get rid of homes being built to sleep 29 people with 2 parking places, because that's what creates the problem. We made some changes here a few years ago in the Land Development Code that require a certain number of parking places per bed, basically.
Right.
And when that happened, it really slowed down that monster house development process. Because if you can't show that you've got parking for 2 cars per bed,
Right.
then, or whatever, I'm not sure that's the exact number, I'm just as a reference, then you can't get a building permit. A lot of people come in asking for variances and stuff. Well, variances are built into the code. I mean, if you can show that you fit certain criteria, you're allowed to have that variance. I don't agree with variants that reduce parking ever. Seldom do I agree with variances that will increase density unless there's other parts of that project that they're more beneficial to the county and to the people who live here. And I think it's a balance you have to look at. It's real easy to sit in the audience and just say no, when you have to look at what's good for Walton County and what the code says. It puts you in a different position.
The county's doing pretty well financially?
The county's doing very well financially. I think that, they projected like a $8 or $9 million shortfall because of COVID. The county was able to bring, transfer money or do things with the budget to where it was never really realized. The county has reserves in place to take care of stuff like that. And I think that is a key part of what makes the county healthy.
Can you talk about the TDC for a minute? What do you think about the TDC? Are you in favor of having a TDC? I know it's not really in our control.
Yeah, I am. I think that people have to understand that the TDC is there to benefit the county and to benefit not just tourists, but those who live here, because it saves us, it keeps our tax rate low because we don't have to spend money on a lot of things on that beach that we otherwise would have to as a county. The TDC takes care of. I think that we need to seriously look at how the TDC spends its money. I know that the state law controls a lot of that. You have to spend X number of dollars on advertising and this and that and the other.
Right.
But I know if you look at Panama City and other places, they've been a lot more creative, perhaps, with how they spend some of their TDC money.
It seems to me like the challenge of marketing Walton County, South Walton County, is not very big. Well, I mean, it's not that hard to do, right? It's like
you can stop marketing Walton County today, I believe.
Right.
And people aren't going to stop coming.
So in that regard, isn't TDC doing something that is unnecessary?
No, I mean, I think you still have to be out there. I think you do have to have a presence, not as much of a presence or as forceful of a presence, but I think the TDC still has a role. But I think the biggest thing the TDC does today, really, is maintains the beach and the beach accesses and keeps that stuff going. I would rather see the TDC spend money to hire 200 beach ambassadors, and you have beach ambassadors walking up and down that beach every day, all day long. To me, is creating an environment where people enjoy being at the beach. In other words, the beach ambassadors walking down the beach and they see somebody drinking beer out of a glass bottle. Be nice. Walk over and say, hey, listen, I just want to remind you that the Walton County has an ordinance that prevents you from having glass bottles on the beach. Here's a cup. Would you pour your beer in the cup? Take the bottle and put it in the trash can. Stuff like that. I mean, having more code enforcement officers available to enforce the codes down on the beach. But you don't want that code enforcement officer to be the focal point of a visitor's experience. In other words, that beach ambassador can approach somebody, and if that person's uncooperative, that beach ambassador can then contact code and say, hey, I need you over here to help me.
The current comp plan was written in, 2011?
I'll take your word for it. I can't tell you.
What would it take to rewrite the comp code, or at least sit down with it and edit it to?
Well, we had some major changes done last year before.
Okay.
With trying to clarify discrepancies between the comp plan and land development code. There were some major changes made, and just trying to make them work better together because there was a lot of conflicts.
Can you summarize
I can't tell you. There were literally there was a bunch of them. I mean, the comp plan would say one thing, the land development code would say something else. It just married. Just created consistency.
Right.
Consistency. basically, the state's involved in that process. You have to have things approved by the state. I mean, there's legislative language that has to be done.
Does the planning committee have statistics on how many variances that they issue in a year or a month? Or
I don't think so. The planning department might have.
Right.
The planning commission don't keep up with that.
Gotcha. Would it be a high number?
I don't think so. I mean, there are certainly variances that are granted, and there are variances that are denied. Mm-hmm. And like I said before, it really is a matter of, if a variance is requested, first of all, does the request of that variance meet the code? Mm-hmm. And then it's, okay, if this variance is granted, are there other aspects of the project that will be enhanced to make the overall project better? Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a balance, and it's a judgment call. But at the same time, if it meets the requirements of the code, it's pretty clear.
Obviously, the environment is really important in this area. We have amazing coastal dune lakes that are very rare across the world. We have a huge bay and a lot of other features, state parks. Do you feel like we're being good stewards of our economy or of our ecosystem here in Walton County right now? And do you see any place where change needs to happen on how we take care of the environment?
I think overall we do a good job. I think that I personally don't like filling wetlands, but there's a provisions in the law that allows that to be done. I would like to see less of that done. But I think the coastal dune lakes are probably the crown jewel of Walton County, as important to anything as we have. People that own land around them, again, have rights that go with that land. Mm-hmm. But that's one area where, granting variances or making changes to what's allowed, I have a very hard time with. I don't think there's very many reasons you should be granting variances around a coastal dune lake.
Are you familiar with the process going on right now?
Draper Lake?
Walton, Draper
Absolutely.
Lake?
Well, I know what I've seen publicly. That's all I know.
Gotcha.
I can't see
Are they requesting variances, or are they
lots of them?
Lots of variances.
I can't see any path forward for them to get approval. None. There's no justification in my mind, especially around a coastal dune lake, for zero setbacks. You can't make that happen and take care of that coastal dune lake and the environment around it.
Right.
I know a lot of people are concerned about that, and I think they have a right to be concerned about it. I can't see any way that gets approved.
Do you think a company, and I don't mean to pick on D.R. Horton, but surely they're not blind to what a development there would mean for the environment and people's reactions? Why would they bring such a request or development idea to the table if they are concerned with their impact on the community? I
would say, just my thoughts are, if bringing that type of development to that location, to me, shows they probably have very little respect for the environment or how it would impact that coastal dune lake.
10-4. Do you think that Walton County politics, government, is a corrupt entity? Do you think corruption exists?
No. I would love to see someone point me to where it does. And you hear that. I mean, you hear some people that every other word out of their mouth is Walton County's corrupt politics. You got corrupt people here. Where? I've been on the Planning Commission for 7 years, chaired it for 5 years. No one has ever approached me, asked me to do anything that wasn't right. I mean, I hardly talk to anybody outside of the Planning Commission environment about issues that are going to come before the Planning Commission. I don't want a conflict. But you hear the developers paying people off. Who? I want to see it. I've never seen it. I don't believe it happens.
Where do you think that feeling or sentiment comes from?
I think it comes from a few people who, for whatever reason, have issues with the county, and they may have legitimate issues with the county. Are we rolling again?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to finish that thought.
Yeah, please.
I said, 10 years on that pension board, 4 years as president of the 2,000 member association. Never once was my integrity questioned. I'm a Christian. I go to church. I'm a deacon in my church. I take my responsibilities very seriously. And it's, you can say it's hurtful. You can say, but it just, my daddy taught me,
right.
To never dirty his name. And I would never do anything that would tarnish my father's name.
Well, your campaign contributions, have you received any contributions from Davie, Florida?
Yep, sure have. They're one of the largest landowners in Walton County.
Who is they?
It's the Foreman family.
The Foreman family.
They have never asked me for anything.
Right.
They want good government. They want consistency in government. If the Land Development Code says something, then that's what they want. They've never, I've had meetings with them before they gave me a contribution. And I told them, I said, if you bring something to Walton County, I'll look at it just like I'll look at some bill right at the Feniac Springs to bring something to the county. It's no different.
Why do you think they contributed to your campaign?
Because they feel like I'll be the best person to help move Walton County forward. Period. They want good government. If
on the agenda the height restriction came up for a vote, is there any circumstance where you would vote yes for that?
Never. That 50-foot height restriction is what makes Walton County what it is. It sets us apart from Okaloosa County, Bay County, or any other county. We have a nice coastline, and I wish that 40 years ago somebody had the foresight to say, we're not building south of 30A. But they didn't, and we can't go back and fix that today.
Right.
But as far as the height limit, I cannot see ever anyone supporting that. There may be developers who have that as a pie in the sky wish, but I cannot see it ever being approved. That's what makes Walton County, and it will always be that way.
Do you have any strong opinions on how beach vendors operate?
I do.
What do you think about how they operate, and what kind of changes would you make, if any?
Personally, I think that a lot of changes could be made. I think the county has worked for several years to try to strengthen those rules. I don't think they've ever gotten quite strong enough. I don't believe that a beach chair or umbrella should be on the beach without a butt to sit in it.
So the argument is that the customer paid for that chair and they got up or just aren't there to take possession of it yet.
If they're not there, they don't need it. When they're there, they can have it down there. I don't believe that a vendor should have the ability to dominate public beach. I actually like the idea of taking a list of public beach accesses and having a bid process for vendors. If you want to vend at this beach access, you bid to take care of that beach access. And if you win that bid, you have to have somebody there the entire time you're vending. In other words, if you open at 8 o'clock in the morning, you got to have somebody there at 8 o'clock in the morning. And they have to be there until you're done vending for that day. Until I get the last chair and umbrella off the sand. If somebody has a setup paid for, when they get there, they can go to that vendor and say, hey, I'm here. Look at the list. Okay, I'll take it down there for you and set it up. That's how I see it should work. I don't think a Walton County citizen should go to a public beach access in South Walton County wanting to go to the beach and enjoy themselves for the day and have to fight over beach space with an empty chair.
How do you feel about traffic, in South Walton particularly?
It's horrible.
Electric vehicles, golf carts.
The state law mandates some of the golf cart stuff as far as the electric vehicles and things. I don't like them personally. I mean, a lot of that, though, is mandated in state law. I think a lot of the problems, particularly on 30A, are created by lack of parking. You got people driving back and forth and around in circles looking for a parking place.
And how do you solve the parking problem?
That's a great question. I know that a lot of things have been looked at over the years. I know at one point a few years ago, parking garages were looked at.
Well, you either have to have more parking spaces or less vehicles, right?
That's right. And my idea is you have to get those vehicles off of 30A.
Right. So if you got the vehicles off 30A, would it make more sense to have electric vehicles as a mode of individual transportation?
I think it's a combination. I think there are locations north of 30A where you could build some parking structures. But I think if you do that, you have to do it in combination with providing a shuttle service from that parking location to beach accesses or shopping, and make that shuttle service consistent. And it has to run on a timely schedule. And I think it has to be free. I think that's a service provided by the TDC.
Walton County, I'm sure, has commissioned these reports and surveys and studies to determine public transportation. Right. But yet we don't have any viable means of public transportation. You look at towns like Breckenridge, Colorado, up in the Rocky Mountains that spans across several towns. They have a shuttle service that runs almost 24 hours a day, every 15 minutes, and other places.
And that's how it should. That's how it has to be. If you're going to try to keep cars from driving up and down 30A, you have to give them an alternative. You have to give them a place to park, and they have to know that when they park there, they can get where they want to go, and they can get back in a timely manner. If you do that, I think you can be successful. But it's not going to be cheap. But I think you can do parking structures. I'm sure you could probably come up with a public-private partnership of some kind to get it built and to operate it. The shuttle service, I think, has to be operated by the TDC. It has to be clean, convenient, and safe. There's simply not enough space on 30A to create parking on 30A to handle the people that want to be there.
That are here now.
Yeah, you can't do it. So it has to be alternative. I know the county has a mobility plan they've been working on for a long time.
And I think that's what's frustrating to a lot of people is that
it takes forever.
We've been working on things for a long time. And I'm sure you will commit to being very aggressive towards pushing action forward.
I'm going to give you an example of that. When I was police association president, negotiating our collective bargaining agreement, we have our retiree health care is in a separate fund that was paid for by the contract, by contributions from the city and members. But the benefits were controlled by an outside board. That was an extremely costly item in the contract. And the people who were affected by the decisions made in that contract had no say in it because they were retirees, they weren't active members. One of the most difficult things we did is during that contract negotiations, working with the board that was appointed or elected to represent that fund, went to Austin to the state capitol, created a state law just modeled after our pension fund law, and removed the entire retiree health care system from our contract. That had been talked about for 20 years, 25 years since it was created. It was never done because people were afraid of it. They were afraid to say, well, in order to pay for this thing to make it viable long term, it's going to cost money, and people are going to have to spend money. We're going to increase our contributions. What I found is that if I told you, when you retire, you're going to have health care for the rest of your life that you're not going to have to pay for. But in order to have that, it's going to cost you more every payday now.
Right.
People were okay with that because they knew
it was going somewhere they were going to get back.
It was going somewhere they were going to get back.
Right.
Okay. That was a long-term problem that had been around since the 80s that I was able to help solve because I wasn't willing to kick it down the road. The easiest thing for me to do was to say, okay, city, you kick in $20 more a month, we'll kick in $20 more a month, and we'll move on down the road. And 4 years from now, when the contract's up for negotiation again, we can argue about it then.
Right.
That wasn't the right thing to do. I don't like kicking things down the road. I'm not afraid to make a decision. I like to get things done. So that's my back. That's what I do.
How do you feel about term limits?
That's something I don't. There may be some term limits that make sense. What turned me off the term limits in San Antonio back in the 80s and 90s, they had the most strict term limits in the country. Two-year terms is all you could serve on the city council or the mayor. It was horrible. You had so much turnover that staff had all the power. Staff controlled everything that happened.
Interesting.
And it was backwards. There may be a balance somewhere. 4 years, I can tell you, is not long enough because it takes you that long to learn how to do the job.
Right.
But you have to have a balance between experienced commissioners and experienced staff, where neither one of them have an advantage over the other. And that's what happened in San Antonio. Staff had total run of the city because they had been there for so long.
I can see how that would generate a problem on the short end of the spectrum.
I was blessed to have, when I was elected president of the association, we supported somebody for mayor who ended up being the best mayor that city's ever had. He was not the chosen one. He was the outsider who came in and truly ran to serve because he wanted to give back to the city. He was a retired Chief Justice from the Fourth Court of Appeals, had been an extremely successful trial lawyer, and back in the 60s was appointed to head the Peace Corps by LBJ. He was liberal. In San Antonio, a conservative could not get elected to a citywide office.
And he only got 4 years.
He only got 4 years.
We're at about 42 minutes. I just have one last topic, and that's the customary use topic. What do you feel about that? Who's right? Who's wrong? How do we solve the issue?
That's a great question. I mean, I can tell you that I believe that the public has the right to traverse the beach. I did it when I was in diapers down here in South Walton County.
And private beach owners are going to say, no problem, just keep
Exactly.
your feet wet.
I think it's a tough issue. I think it's an issue that was created by...
Do they have a right to sit on the beach?
I believe they do.
Okay.
I believe everybody does.
Right.
Now, I think that a private property owner obviously has rights to go with his property. I can't tell you the perfect answer, but I can tell you that I believe at the end of the day, we have to come up with a solution, whether it be customary use going through the courts or something short of that, that gives the public the right to use the beach.
The House Bill 631 that sort of, was the catalyst to all this, as I understand it, I could be wrong, was authored by a state congressperson in South Florida. And the way that it shook out, it only affects Walton County.
That's right. Intentionally.
And I believe our state legislator here voted for it.
I think he had no choice but to vote for it.
Why would he have no choice?
Well, I say that. He had a choice, obviously. It was going to pass whether he voted for it or not.
Okay.
I think it's a horrible bill.
Do you have any feelings as to why the bill was introduced in the first place?
I'm sure it was wealthy people contributing to political campaigns at the state level.
Is that corruption?
I think, I don't know if it's corruption. It's the political process.
Okay.
And I think you have to have people in those positions who are strong enough in their conviction not to be swayed by that.
Okay.
I think that, just like our pension bill in Texas, it's bracketed. It's a state law. That only applies to San Antonio because of the language contained in it. And that's how 631 was done.
Was that intentional, or?
I believe it was intentional. It only affected Walton County.
Right.
Nobody else was affected by it. I think the problem was created by lack of enforcement of the code and the county not taking steps it should have taken to ensure that those property owners were able to quietly enjoy their property. It's a difficult issue to solve. I think there's ways to solve it. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of commitment from both sides to be able to make it happen. Do you think the resolution
is neutral, or is weightier on the customary use or on the private beachfront owner? Because it's my understanding that private beachfront owners have, in some cases, gone and quit claim property even further to the, high average mean water mark?
Yeah. I think the ultimate solution has to be something that gives the public the right to use the dry sand on the beach. I think anything short of that is cheating the citizens of Walton County. How you get there, I think, is the problem. But I think that it's going to take critical thinking by a lot of people and a commitment to solve a problem. I don't think it's something that you're going to be able to wave a wand. I think customary use, the legal challenge, is years down the road before you ever have any kind of resolution on that. I don't think we can wait that long. I think that we need to get people together to talk and see if there's a way to come to some type of agreement to move forward.
10-4. Is there anything else you'd like to say about any of your opponents or just in general?
I don't talk about opponents. I'm here. I'm running for Walton County Commissioner District 3. I believe that my background and my experience would serve the county well. I don't. You hear a lot out there, and I've read a lot out there that, quite frankly, is disgusting. I'm not going to get into that. I'm Teddy. I don't need anybody to buy me off. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here because I love Walton County. When I moved back from Texas, I could have moved anywhere I wanted to. My wife wanted to move to Blue Water Bay. I told her, I said, best of luck to you. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, you can live in Blue Water Bay if you want to. I'm living in Walton County. That's home. That's where I want to be. I'll never do anything to hurt Walton County, period. This is my home. It's been my home all my life. It's been my family's home for 150 years on both sides, my mom and dad. That's why I'm running. I want to take care of Walton County.
10-4. Well, I really appreciate your time, and we'll wrap it up right here, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate the opportunity.